Ryan Reynolds here for, I guess, my 100th Mint commercial. No. I mean, honestly, when I started this, I thought I only have to do like 4 of these. I mean, it's unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month. How are there still people paying 2 or 3 times that much? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be victim blaming here. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/save. Whenever you're ready.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
Ampire.
Hey babies, hey babies, hey babies. Hi everyone, hi everyone, hi everyone, hi everyone. Welcome in. Big time preview day. Commanders and Ravens. Huge game for Washington. Ho-hum, just another big one for the Ravens, who've been in the playoffs 5 of the last 6 years, have a 2-time MVP, reigning winner of that particular award. And we get our first real showcase game down here, and another Dan Quinn doesn't want to call it a measuring stick, but measuring stick, I think, for the fan base to just kind of see how real 4-1 is against a team that we're accustomed to seeing vie for championships this year. I spoke with the play-by-play voice of the Baltimore Ravens, Gerry Sandusky. You're going to hear that in a little bit. And you'll be surprised when I asked him about the 3-2 start and whether he's a little surprised by a slow-ish start, specifically on defense, on a team that people just perceive as an annual Super Bowl contender. You might be a little surprised how he kind of frames that. But I'm going to start with my weekly conversation with Keim, which we did yesterday out at practice in Ashburn, and focused mainly on Washington and a 4-1 start that is beyond expectation. Number 1 offense in the league. Jaden Daniels has the best completion percentage of anybody in the league. There's 8 million historical stats I could post about this game and their performance and his specific performance that are just rewriting record books. But let's just get to the conversation with Keim. Time for a weekly visit with Keim from ESPN. Keim Report. Dan Quinn says this is not a measuring stick game. Is it?
Depends on how you want to view this after the game too, right? But the one part where I agree with him is this is only game 6. There's a long way to go. So if you use this as a measuring stick, like what does it say if X happens or Y? And if let's say you go up there and win, but you don't take care of business the next week, well, what does it say? Do you know what I'm saying? But I do think it's a good barometer of how far they've come, if that makes sense.
How about this one? Washington has the number 1 scoring offense in the NFL, and Baltimore has a pass defense in the bottom 5. Maybe it's a measuring stick for their defense this week.
Oh, I think it's a measuring stick for the Ravens defense, but in Washington's defense too. Like, it's a good chance. How much have they grown? But the thing is that this team is good. Like, the result from the Ravens game, I don't think changes it. I think this team can still be good.
That's right.
Regardless of the outcome of this game. That's where I agree with the measuring stick aspect. It's not like, I think what we've seen has been highly unusual from an offensive perspective. This is not a fluke for them.
Yeah. I want to touch on something that Quinn talked about in a moment, but, this is all new for everybody around here. We don't need to go through the history of that. This team has not been consistent on any level or competitive in a number of years. And I think that's why people are asking a question like that. And they won't ask this of Baltimore. They've been in the playoffs 5 of the last 6 years. Their coach has been there for 17 years. Their front office is, they have their style of players that they bring in. They have an MVP quarterback over there. This is nothing new to them. This is what Washington hopes to be, right? Them, really.
Listen, they have big games every year against Pittsburgh, if the Browns or Bengals are good that year.
They just had one with Cincinnati, which might be a death knell for the Bengals. They just played in Dallas 2 weeks ago. That's a huge game in a 4 o'clock window.
Right, and because of who they are, their success, every game for them becomes a referendum on, is Lamar the best in the league, or what is he, right? And how good is he? And yes, he's the MVP, but the playoff wins, etc. So there's a different chatter around them. Because this team is rising, I get why people say that. But what I don't understand, Bram, is when people say, I won't believe in them unless X happens. Like, that's like, what they've shown the last 4 games is something you can believe in is real. Like, it's not fake. It's not like they're coming off, they've lost a couple in a row and then they had a good game against the Browns. Like, they've been building, and that's where I say, like, the reality check is not, to me, a storyline with this at all. If you want to say, like, how good are they? Are they Super Bowl contenders, or are they this contender or that contender? Okay, but even if they win, you have if I do my math right, 11 games left.
That's right. It's week 6.
Right.
The Eagles were 10-1 a year ago and fell off a cliff. So and they were just in the Super Bowl a couple years earlier. So I agree with you. That none of this is going to ultimately matter unless there is consistency and longevity. Everyone keeps pointing to Houston last year because C.J. Stroud had the season he had. They went 10-7.
Right.
It's not like they went 15-2. So Washington's going to lose, and they very well might lose this weekend. As long as it's not in a way that exposes things that we haven't seen yet, then I don't think there's a referendum on any of this at this point.
Right. And listen, if it comes out and the defense gives up a few big plays, that happens against Lamar Jackson.
And Derrick Henry.
Yeah. And so, that wouldn't be unusual. But also, would it surprise you if you go out and they see this team move the ball on them? No, because this team has shown they can, and that team has shown they haven't stopped it. So I don't, even if it's a bad blowout, which I don't see happening.
Neither do
Let's say that happens. You still got to come back the next week, and if you come back and you beat teams, the Panthers and then the Bears and the Giants, all right, I think most people would take that. And you build toward getting to where certain teams are. They're still building. The Ravens are at a certain point, but even that team is trying to build because they rebuilt their defense because of coaching staff. But they are still this is a team that is not a finished product. That's why if this were oh my gosh, it's week 16 and they've been really good, and oh, how good are they? Are they really? No, this team is still building to me, right? And they definitely are. And so that's why I just don't see it as anything other than it's game 6. It's a really, really good test. We will learn a lot. I thought we learned about them against the Browns too. You come in against a team that's not playing well and you handled your business. That's a mature team. You learn something there too.
Yeah. On the, I thought, who was it? It was Liam from the Washington Times asked this the other day of Quinn on the Zoom that he did. And I thought it was just really well put, where he said, what do you say to fans who are waiting for the other shoe to drop?
Right.
And I thought it was a really well put way to put it, because I did feel like it is the pulse of the fan base to a certain degree, that this feels almost like a fairy tale and so literally unbelievable that it's come together this fast, that I think it's a fair question to ask. And I love how he answered it. It's 2024. None of us, and I mean none of us, were here for the past of any of it.
Correct.
And therefore, why can't you believe that, that things are really, really different and they're going to remain that way?
For sure. And I think there were times that the last staff felt burdened by the past, but they allowed themselves to feel that way. I think what also helps is you have a lot of people who came from outside the organization, not just the coaching staff and the GMs and others. I mean, Josh Harris wasn't here for almost all of that, except for 1 year. But you also have a lot of players from the outside. You brought in guys like Bobby Wagner, Zach Ertz, guys who have won. And I think that matters too. They don't care. They know what happened here but it was different teams. And the fan base has suffered through it. I get it. But this is a far different team and organization. This is a much more mature organization. You go back to the last time they started 4-1 was with Jim Zorn as the head coach. With Jim Zorn, even at the time, I don't think he understood how hard that was and how hard it was to maintain it. Because Bram, that year, they're 6-3, and he was asked about injuries or guys not playing. He's like, hey, I got to get them healthy for the playoffs. And you're talking about the playoffs after the 9th game, going into the 10th game? Are you kidding me? That automatically is when you're not suited for that, when you start looking like that. These guys every week it's even after the first game, the second game, whatever, the message has been the same.
Yeah.
And I think that consistency helps to build, and it helps to block out a lot of noise from the past.
And that it happening fast, it's happened faster than I could have ever really imagined. This is they'll make a movie about this if this continues to go the way it's going. They're rewriting their own franchise's history. Every week we get these statistical anomalies of not since this year, not since that year, first time ever, and it's every week and it's a list of them. So they're doing things that are really, really, really abnormal. But going back to the organization, the setup, the ownership is not in the news for the wrong reasons. Right. They have spent a lot of money. I think this is an underrated part of this. They have spent a tremendous amount of money on infrastructure and for wishes of the coaching staff. They've been on the road for 3 weeks. since the beginning of training camp, where they did joint practices. They're a week in Miami, a week in New York, a week in Arizona because they asked to be. Right. The owners are giving them what they want to say that they want to win. Adam Peters comes in here. Adam Peters has been with New England, Denver, and San Francisco, all of which have standards and practices and have been top-level performing teams when he was there among them. He knows what this looks like. And Dan Quinn, I know people complained about his hiring at first. Year 2 as a coach, he was in the Super Bowl. He coached the Legion of Boom. The Dallas defense over the last couple of years was arguably among the best, if not the best defense. They were a turnover machine. They were top 5 in metrics. Why everybody is stunned that they're good, especially with their quarterback playing the way they are, I think is an overreach. It just goes back to, we just haven't been good and we're beaten down as a fan base, and this is hard to believe.
I think that's a lot of it. And I'll go back to the Quinn hiring too, because even at the time, there are still narratives that were ridiculous. And, was he absolutely the lock solid first choice when it started? Well, no, nobody really was. Ben Johnson was high on that list. So was Dan Quinn. And they went through the process. And I remember talking to people throughout that process who played for him, coached with him, coached against him, knew him, or knew of him. And it was no other coach received the unanimous opinions that Quinn did in that situation. And just this, and how one coach was he's the best at setting the standard for the building. And I think we've seen that. And the energy that he's brought to it was underrated. And I remember talking to people about that, and they're like, yeah, but the roster, blah, blah, blah. But you can't ignore X, Y, and Z. I've seen it before out here where the roster maxes out because of the approach by the coaches, whether it was Marty Schottenheimer, Joe Gibbs sometimes. You see them max out because of that. And I felt that here. I didn't know what that would be, Bram. I'm not going to sit here and say, I thought they'd be 4-1. I did think that Jay Daniels would be a good quarterback. Didn't know when. I did think they were building the approach was the right one, but who knew when it would start to pay off? I didn't think 4-1.
Yes.
But I'm surprised but not shocked.
They're not flawless. I mean, they say they're going to get the ball. They're bottom 3 in the league in turnovers. Right. So that's a next step for them. Their tackling is better, as they said it. Their physicality is better. They've given up more passing touchdowns than anybody in the NFL. All the joyride of all these things happening. So some of those, faults of the roster or the growing pains, they're evident. They're just winning through it because the offense has been so utterly, ridiculously efficient that it's masked a lot of it. Some of the questions have been answered on the other side of the ball. Maybe they don't need another number 2 receiver. Maybe they do have a left tackle. Maybe their offensive line is fine. Some of those seemingly are going that way. But this is why, I was asked the other day, has the defense arrived? No. They told me they're going to get the ball all the time. Right. That hasn't happened. And they'll tell you that too.
Right. And here's the other part. If you want to really see the measuring stick, regardless of the game, can they win a game if the offense struggles early and the defense is giving up a couple points, right? So, that's when you see, the complementary football. Can the defense, and they did it against the Browns, but the Browns don't have a good offense right now. What happens if the offense starts slow against Baltimore? Is the defense doing its part to make sure you're still in the game, right? That's what I want to see. Now, the Arizona game, they did that. That was one of the things that I think they did well, and they the turnover happened. They forced a 3 and out. That was good, and so that was a good sign for them. But against this offense, what happens if? And so that's something that we'll see, measuring the growth of the defense and where they are. But yeah, taking the ball away is absolutely the next step. I do think that you have to start taking the ball away, you have to be playing fast and physical. Yeah. And I think I saw a different play speed last week where, are they getting more confident or comfortable in what they're doing? But then also, Joe Witt talked last week, defensive coordinator, about how maybe he was trying to put too much information in their heads during practice, maybe going over too many things. Cut back what you have to go over the big stuff and the main stuff, but not every single thing, because you're just clogging their heads. Did that help? Yeah. But we'll see, because that's where this is a great offense though. But if they give up 30 points, I'm not going to be surprised, because that's a damn good offense on the other side there. Just like if this team scores 30, I'm not going to be surprised.
I'm really happy that the first real big game, and I don't really count Cincinnati because I don't think we knew what we knew about them going into that Cincinnati game. It was Monday night. Burrow, is playing there. It was a really great moment. I described it as this is the beginning of something by pulling off what they did. But here's now one where Nance and Romo are going to call the game. CBS is putting a prime group on it. They tried to flex it. This is the first real big game, and I think it's very fitting that it's Baltimore because of something Quinn said earlier, which is, and he just offhanded said, we know they're a really good team and they have an identity. They know who they want to pick. Their front office they know what they want to be. Even today, their defensive coordinator, announced that Dean Pease is a longtime defensive coordinator, is coming back as a senior advisor to help them to try to figure out. And what he said was, he's a Raven. He understands what we do here. This is what they're trying to be. They're trying to be them. Whatever their identity is, they're trying to be them. And I actually think it's very fitting that in our first real big game of this new era, that it's against a team that is not only right up the street, but you want to emulate organizationally.
For sure.
5 or 6 years they've been in the playoffs. 17 of the last 25, they've been in the playoffs. That's what you want.
For sure, and I think you're right. This is just starting. You cannot get to that point after 5 games. You just can't. You can, because for them, it's not just a win or a loss. It's the consistency of it. Can you build, and that's one thing under Dan Snyder, I never thought they'd build a consistent winner because the owner didn't understand how to do that. Other people in the organization didn't understand how to do that. You didn't, so there are a lot of things working against them. I do believe they have that now. So you're right. It's Adam Peters identifying who is a commander player. Who is it that this coach is looking for? And the Ravens have done this throughout different coaches, which is unbelievably impressive. So yeah, you're right.
Sort of. Harbaugh's been there 17 years.
Well, that's true. But they've been good for a long time.
Yes.
But there is. Well, I guess I say too, throughout also different people in the front office. Newsom is not the guy in charge. So there has been some change, but it has been very impressive, and you do not get there overnight. That's why I don't expect crazy moves because they're now good.
Neither do I.
I'm expecting them to, if somebody becomes available you can get at a good price, okay, but short of that, I don't expect them to start mortgaging the future, doing something silly to bring someone else in. Oh my gosh, you got a chance. If you want to build something sustainable, this is the approach you take, they're taking.
There are periods of time, it happened last year with Baltimore, where in the course of a season, they're the best team in the NFL.
Right.
And right now, I actually don't even think it's arguable that Washington's in the discussion of best performing teams across the board in the NFL over a 3-week period. They have the best scoring offense in the league. If you go watch them, the thing that really stands out when I watch them, and I think this is what's so really different, and I just haven't seen in so long, maybe since a Gibbs team, is across the board, players 40 through 45 on the roster are making these plays. Jeremy McNichols, Bryson Tremaine, who's called up from the practice squad, who's blocking on a 3rd and 11 to just run clock in a game that's over. He's downfield blocking. McCaffrey doing what he's doing. Biotish has been a Pro Bowler, maybe an All-Pro center this year. It's across the board at every position group. You're finding these moments from players that are all making plays. It's stunning to watch. I don't know how long it can last, but that's why they're winning. It's not just Superman wears number 5.
Right.
Across the board, this team is playing at a level that I have not seen them collectively play maybe ever since I've covered them.
So, and I agree with that. So there's a couple of things to me. First, it's identifying the right players to get. So if you want to get guys who play a certain way, you go find that guy. You don't find any player and build them into that. You find a player that fits your profile. Zacchaeus clearly does. McCaffrey clearly does. They knew what they needed in a defensive leader. They get Bobby Wagner. They wanted someone who plays with their hair on fire. You get Frankie Louvu because you also know them, right? And I think this is why, at free agency,
they've done nothing to harm their cap moving forward with any of them.
But it was a good identification of what you need and what you want, what you're looking for, who fits your, there are some guys they've let go because they didn't fit the profile of what you're looking for.
That's right.
And so, you want to know why Noah Brown's here and not Martavis Bryant? Because the profile. And
you want to know why Jahan Dotson's not here?
Correct.
I can tell you.
Oh, for sure.
You think he's going to be blocking downfield the way McLaurin or McCaffrey or something? No, that's what it is.
Right. And but to your point though, I agree. I also think when you have, what I also like is that Dan Quinn points out their efforts. They're not just singing, he'll point out that Zacchaeus during the Bengals game is going up to guys and congratulating them after plays in a game where he's not playing much. I think he played 5 snaps in that game, but yet Quinn talks about him after the game for how he approached that. When your coach is doing that, I think it also fuels you to go out and play a certain way because you know what? He notices what I'm doing. And so you want to go play. It just starts, get the guys with the right mindset, and I think that's how you build good teams. Gibbs had those teams, right?
Yeah.
I think the Marty team in 2001, you had a lot of guys who, that wasn't a talented roster. roster, yet they won 8 out of 11 at the end because I think you had guys who bought in and played a certain way with a certain mindset. And there have been too many times here in the past, Bram, where I think you had a lot of guys who thought they were at a certain level, who played like they thought they were a certain level, but who were not.
Yeah.
And it was resulting in 7-9, 9-7, 7-9, 6-10, 4-12.
Do want to talk about Jaden for a second because they're just two moments that really stand out. You know, I think we've gushed about them for good reason, but there are two from the other day that are just extraordinary and I think exemplify how far ahead of the curve he actually is. They go for a 4th and 3 at the Cleveland 40, okay? And the score's like 7-3 at this point. So, you know, I guess you can't kick a field goal. They feel like it's too long. But the way Cleveland's offense is going, it warrants punting and pinning them deep. But they don't do that. They show confidence and they go for it. You fail on this, you give Cleveland pretty good field position in a game that feels up in the air, and your offense isn't doing very much at this point. And on 4th and 3, Cleveland brings pressure. It's a Pro Bowl linebacker coming off the edge who gets a minor chip block but gets a free rush at him. He calmly jukes the guy, goes out to the right side and runs for 34 yards down the field. How many times have you seen a quarterback either get sacked or force a pass where I don't know where the ball was supposed to go? Force the pass. He doesn't do either one of these things. And then the second one is at the end of the first half. It's a 3rd down that he runs out of bounds and has this famous, tells Kingsbury, call this play. On the next play, he doesn't know what Cleveland's defense is going to be when he runs back to the line of scrimmage, but almost like he's omniscient, knows it. And he's right, and he throws a dart to De'Ami Brown, who he knew had a good matchup somehow. Like, this guy is some kind of otherworldly start to a career. And those are the 2 points that I look at and I go, oh my God, like what do we have here if he's doing these things in game 5?
Well, and that's the thing, like the 4th and 3, I don't know that I've seen a quarterback who wouldn't have been sacked or thrown away. Now, I will say, like, McCaffrey was open over the middle. I don't know that he could have gotten it to him because the way Koromo was bearing down at him. So what he had to do is get out of there, and he did. That's just an impressive quickness, awareness.
His instincts, his senses are off the charts.
And I talked to one of the linemen last week about, just various things with him. He said it was his pocket movement. He goes, is really, really good. And like that helps an offensive line. The other play, what I liked about that is he runs out of bounds on the one run before the De'Ami play. With the previous play, they ran the exact same play that they ran on the touchdown. And De'Ami runs by the corner. They ran the same concept. So that to me is where the awareness comes in.
Yeah.
To your point, where he's like, you see this, you saw him get open, and maybe De'Ami tells him, I was open. But I know that, he goes and tells him to play, and that's just impressive awareness to do that. But I also think the fact that Kingsbury's like, all right, let's
go ahead.
It. Like what kind of the trust that he put in his.
Why wouldn't he at this point?
Right,
yeah.
Exactly. So I think that those are all like. There's so many times where it's like that's impressive, and there's subtle things sometimes too. Like Dan Quinn talked about. Sometimes it's just I was talking to Jay Gruden about this. Like sometimes it's like a 3-yard run, and it's like he's looking at it like that's a damn good run because you avoided 11-yard sack. Fans might say, oh, it's 3 yards. And he's like, you avoided a big negative. That's what he brings too. It's a lot of good things.
All right. I just have to verify this. I want to fact check something. Resh Manuel says on Twitter, you will be covering your 500th Commanders game as of some point this season. Is that true?
I don't know. I told my wife that we were on a walk today, and I'm like, I don't know if that's true. And I was trying to do the math. I'm like, I'm not sure when that would be. Now, there are also...
It's somewhere in the middle of the season. He marked it down.
And I know, it's now because he did the math, but like there was also a game where I missed it because I was coming back from my grandmother's funeral, so you deduct that. There were games I didn't travel to, but I'm covering them from home, right? Or covering them, whatever. So I don't know, Bram. I'd have to go back and do the math, but it's probably pretty close.
Here's the crazy part. You had to wait for 495 games to get the biggest one of your career.
No kidding. I mean, that's
crazy.
There's, I've always kind of felt like Morgan Freeman in Shawshank, where you're locked up for this long before you get paroled and you can actually watch.
So the tunnel's done now. You're saying the tunnel's done? It took the whole movie, but the tunnel's done.
So there's a payoff somewhere on the beach.
I'll meet you by the tree somewhere.
That's right. So, but that is, it's amazing. And a lot of bad football in there, Bram.
It is. All right, thank you. I'll see you up in Baltimore this weekend.
All right, looking forward to it.
Up next, the voice of the Ravens, Gerry Sandusky. Bram watch the show ESPN 630, the Sports Capital.
This episode is brought to you by Honda. When you test drive the new Prologue EV, there's a lot that could impress you about it. There's the class-leading passenger space, the clean, thoughtful design, and the intuitive technology. But out of everything, what you'll really love most is that it's a Honda. Visit honda.com/EV to see offers.
Let's welcome in the play-by-play voice of the Baltimore Ravens, Gerry Sandusky. Gerry, it's great to catch up with you. Thank you for taking the time today.
Great to visit with you, Bram. Looking forward to seeing you on Sunday.
So here's what I want to start with, because obviously this game is an enormous deal for our fan base. We've been waiting for what looks like the guy for a long time, and it looks like we have him. We're off to a start we haven't had in 16 years, literally. And I know this is old hat for you guys, but can you give us some context of how Baltimore's thinking about Washington this week?
Yeah, I think everybody's really impressed with Jaden Daniels and really impressed with what the coaching staff has done in their first year, the aggressiveness of their defense, what Bobby Wagner's brought to that defense. It's a surprisingly mature-looking team for a first-year organization under a new coach, rookie quarterback. It doesn't look like that. So, the first thing John Harbaugh talked about this week was, like, this doesn't look like a rookie quarterback. And I've gone through a lot of the tape and watched Jaden Daniels. I just thought, okay, they're just giving him simple reads, and he just picks out who he's throwing to, and he gets the ball out of his hand quick. Well, then you watch more tape, and you realize he's going through a 3-read progression.
Yeah,
he's reading defense. He's figuring out what's going to be open, and his throws are unbelievable. This kid is, he's the latest unicorn in the land of unicorns, but he makes you stop and really think, whoa, they've got something really special in Washington now.
You have one too, obviously a unicorn. And this is happening to you. I like the way you put it, that this is a surprisingly mature team. We're kind of in a little dreamlike state, because this is beyond expectation. What's happening? We have 30 new players on this team and a rookie quarterback and a new staff and a new front office. It's not supposed to come together this fast, but it is. So here we are. And I want to go back to just a few years back with Lamar. Was there a point, because it's happened early for us, where there's a belief in Jaden? What was the point where you saw Lamar do things on the field and you went, okay, like he's everything we?
So for Lamar, it was more gradual, because Lamar's first game, he was coming out of the bye week as a rookie. Joe Flacco had a hip injury, and so Lamar has to play against the Bengals. And Lamar runs the ball something like 27 times. It set the record for most carries by a quarterback. And the Ravens beat the Bengals, and everybody's really excited. But literally within a minute after the win, they're thinking, there's no way this guy can survive doing this in this league. So it wasn't until his second year as a starter in 2019 where he started to really throw the ball downfield that people thought, whoa, this dual threat thing could really work. Because at first it looked like Lamar was just going to be a running quarterback who threw the ball less than Bob Greasy did in Super Bowl VII. And with Jaden Daniels, the thing that's just been so head-spinning is he has shown up from the start reading defenses, making all the throws, being wild. He's the most accurate quarterback in the NFL. That's not possible. And yet there it is. It's right on tape. So it's a little different between the two, because I would say Jaden Daniels is much more of a made-for-NFL passer from week one than Lamar was when he first started.
Yeah, I think the skepticism between the two is very different. I mean, like, Lamar's athleticism is so outrageous. I think that was probably obvious to you guys, and you wanted to see what kind of passer would he become. Like, from the get-go, Jaden was always a pass-first quarterback here with the ability to run. And he today was asked about comparisons to other players, and he's kind of pushing this off. He doesn't want to be compared to anyone. And honestly, when I look at the two of them, I mean, outside of that, they're both tremendous athletes. I don't see early career similarities between the two. I think they're very different players.
Completely different. I agree with you entirely, Bram, because Lamar was, in his first year or two as a starter, pressure pocket. Man, he's using his legs. He's taking off. Well, now that he's matured in his seventh year, he uses his legs to extend plays. Jaden uses his eyes to extend plays. That is something that is just so unheard of for a rookie quarterback. Peyton Manning didn't do that. Tom Brady didn't do that. Jaden's processing information at light speed like I have never seen with a rookie quarterback before. And he's already come against some really good defensive coordinators who've tried to confuse him.
Yep.
He's looked at covers 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6. He's seen blitz pressure. He's seen off pressure. He's seen even fronts, odd fronts.
That's right.
The things that should have completely confused him by now, he's nonplussed. That's what makes him different than all of the ones that have come before him. Yes, his athleticism is off the chart. Yes, he's a dual threat quarterback, but he makes seventh-year decisions, and he hasn't even played his seventh game in the NFL. That's what's most impressive to me about Jaden.
There were two of them last week, Jerry. They were outrageous. They went for a 4th and 3 in a 7-3 game at the Cleveland 40-yard line, and Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, who you know well, you play him twice a year, is a Pro Bowl linebacker, gets a minor chip block, but has a free rush at him. You know, how many times have you seen any quarterback force a pass, in this moment because he's got to get rid of the ball. He has no time. Nope. He's just cool, calm, collected, jukes him, runs 34 yards down the sideline. Or late in the first half, he runs out of bounds on a 3rd and 3 play where he beats the pressure, goes out of bounds, turns to his offensive coordinator and tells him what play he wants him to call, walks out like omniscient as if he knew exactly what defense Cleveland was going to be in, and throws a 41-yard touchdown pass. This is beyond. I mean, like, you guys have an incredible quarterback, but we don't even know what we're looking at down here right now.
And I think that's a great way to phrase it because, it's easy to want to jump into a comparison between Lamar and Jaden. And, I've heard people call him, Lamar 2.0. That's not accurate and it's not fair.
No.
They're completely different. They're completely different styles, different backgrounds. They're both excellent in their own regards. But you are right to say nobody really knows what you have in Jaden Daniels because he is still a rookie. It's easy to overlook that, but that means there's all kind of upside, and that is frightening.
Yeah.
Kid has that most accurate arm in the NFL right now. He's 5 games into his NFL career. He has poise, he has polish, he has vision. It's frightening what his upside is.
So let's talk about the Ravens defense for a moment. Obviously, they're not having the same season that they did a year ago, different staff out there. What's going on with the Ravens defense here early in the season?
It just hasn't gelled yet. There have been moments we've seen quarters. In Dallas, they had 3 great quarters, and then this got all discombobulated in the fourth quarter. Against the Bills, they had moments that were phenomenal. Against the Bengals, they were super in the first 3 possessions of the game, and then they couldn't stop Joe Burrow except for one possession the rest of the entire afternoon. So it's been a lack of consistency. They're gold standard still in the run defense, and Washington's got a good run offense, so that'll be a test. But they've done a great job consistently. The one thing they've been very consistent is they've taken the run away. They've made opponents one-dimensional. That's what they want to do. That's their fabric. But then on the back end, they have had blown coverage. They've had inconsistent plays. They've had playmakers who haven't made plays sometimes. It's been hard to figure out exactly what the miss is, what the mesh is. We've all seen bad pass defenses. Bad pass defenses are bad all the time. This is not a bad pass defense all the time. Sometimes. And you just don't know when those times are. And that's the mystery. The mystery right now is what's the missing ingredient? Is it the defenses that are being called in the down and distance situations? Is it a player not stepping up to the moment? Is it some intangible? Nobody can put their thumb on it right now consistently. And until they do, it's a worry point because it's great if you can make an opponent one-dimensional, but if you can't stop that other one dimension consistently, you're still playing catch-up ball a lot.
Is the new defensive coordinator trying to essentially run the same system that McDonald was running last year, or has he tried to change things this year?
So for years, if you go back to Dean Pease and Rex Ryan, the Ravens have run a very similar defense through their 8 defensive coordinators. Each defensive coordinator then comes in and puts his touches on their defenses. But it's unlike a lot of organizations that bring in a defensive coordinator and it's a completely different defense. The Ravens have never done that. From Marvin Lewis first in 1996 to Zach Orr in 2024, it has been the evolution of the same basic defensive philosophy. And then each coordinator puts in his touches, his blitz packages, when he's calling cover 3, when he's bringing offside pressure, things like that. But it's an evolution of the same basic defensive mindset, philosophies, and approaches.
So your opinion is this will fix itself. You've seen it too many times.
I've seen it fix itself 2 years ago. Everybody forgets now that Mike McDonald is a much-deserved head coach in Seattle. everybody forgets the first 8 games, they had 3 fourth-quarter collapses that were epic. And then they get Roquan Smith, and that settled things down. And then a year later, they have the number 1 defense in the NFL. I've watched how this sorts itself out. It'll sort itself out in a couple of ways. Zach Orr will grow in the role. He's a 32-year-old defensive coordinator in his first season. There's growing pains, but he's a bright guy. He's always succeeded. He'll figure this out consistently. The players will get a feel for him, and the intangibles will evolve. Players who can't make it happen will self-select out. It sorts itself out. I've watched it too many times.
You know, it's so interesting because Dan Quinn was asked about obviously about the Ravens a lot today, and he did just kind of offhanded mention, you know, they know who they are. You know, they know who they're trying to select. To your point here, they're running a similar system. They're going to bring in coaches that run this system. They don't need to change things. They do it really, really well at a high level annually. And this is what's something that Washington obviously aspires to be. And now that everything is brand new, the slate's clean, and it's possible that they could emulate the Ravens. As you've kind of been part of all of this, I mean, I'm sure you're fully aware that this is one of the best run organizations top to bottom. What do you think has been the secret to maintaining that through the years?
One word: consistency. The Ravens have had 2 owners. They've had 2 general managers. They've had 3 head coaches in 29 years. That level of consistency is unique. You don't find it around the NFL. In a copycat league that tries to poach people, the Ravens rarely poach other people. They get their people poached, but they're not busy going out poaching other people. They're not looking for the next shiny penny. They're not looking for the next, let's try this offense, let's try that defense. The Ravens have their way, and they are strong enough to stay with their consistency, understanding what we just talked about. If you are true to your system, if you believe in your approach, if you have great teacher coaches, it'll sort itself out.
Yeah. Let me ask you one about the offense. I don't know if this has ever happened before. You could have back-to-back MVPs and they're different players because of the season Derrick Henry is having and the numbers he may post this year in that offense. What has he meant to the Ravens offense this year?
Well, he's meant 2 different things. One, the obvious thing. He's meant, here's a guy who can run the ball. He can run through you. You can stack the box. He can still punch it through you. You can give it to him on 3rd and 1. You're getting the first down. He's a closer, as we saw in Cincinnati. He'll give you the big plays when you need him. He's giving you the stats. So you get that level first. But the big thing Derrick Henry is doing is something that great players on great teams in every sport do. Derrick Henry makes everybody else better. I'll give you one play example. It happened in Dallas a couple of weeks ago. After Lamar and Henry are wearing the Cowboys out with the read option, Lamar swings Derrick Henry out of the backfield. Well, Derrick Henry is attracting so much attention, 2 linebackers go with Derrick Henry, which opens up the intermediate out route for the tight end and opens up the deep out route for Zay Flowers. So he's giving guys space who never used to get space in coverage because Derrick Henry draws so much attention, understandably, that you're now seeing Lamar distribute the ball in ways he has never done before. All 3 of the Ravens' tight ends have made big plays. Now, what team has 3 tight ends who can make big plays? You're seeing the 1, the 2, the 3, and the 4 receiver make plays in games. And I firmly believe it's not because those guys have suddenly become much better players. It's because those guys have suddenly been able to play in space. And so now, Derrick Henry, stop him if you can, but in order to stop him, you have to invest so many resources to him, it frees up a lot of other guys. All
right, 2 quick things, big picture, and then I'll let you go. The start is 3-2, but they've won 3 in a row. They did have what I thought was a really unusual loss to the Raiders earlier this year. How they're playing through 5 games, we talked about their defense not performing to what's been the standard for them. Have the expectations for you at all changed? Because I assumed you guys walked in thinking this is a team that can compete for a Super Bowl again.
You know, I'm going to sound like the outlier in this. I did not come in with those expectations, Bram, for this reason. I grew up in the NFL. My dad was a coach in the NFL for a long, long time. He was an assistant coach. John Sandusky, coach with the Colts, the Eagles, and the Dolphins. Don Shula's longest assistant coach. And because of that, I see football from a little different perspective. The Ravens changed their defensive coordinator as well as each level of the defense's position coaches. They lost multiple players to free agency that they had to replace. Mm-hmm. To me, those changes in the coaching staff and the players that they had to replace, not just the star players, but the nickel defensive back, a backup lineman here, a guy who's a below the radar quality starting guard. The guys who we don't talk about on Sports Center, you don't see on the highlights. But when you make those kind of changes in the out of the spotlight positions and coaching staff, it takes time to re-knit it all together. I don't care how stable your organization is. You need weeks and months. And my projection on the Ravens was this. It's going to come together because I've seen it so many times. But will it come together with the record still in good enough shape to make a playoff run? That's the part I didn't know. Well, this team could have easily been 2-5. Now they're obviously 3-2, so they're in better shape right now. But they're still not together. So to me, I'm not worried about the AFC Championship game. It's can they bring it all together in time for the playoff run? And that's the question.
You've got to be pretty pleased with what's going on in your division, though, because the road is Cleveland. We just played Cleveland. They are a mess, specifically on offense. Cincinnati's in a hole. And I think if you look at Pittsburgh's offense, and I know you guys have lived the wars with them, that's not functioning at a level that I think is competitive right now. So maybe to your point, though, the road is maybe a little more open because that looked like a meat grinder. And the road feels very open in your division once again.
Yeah, there are definitely potholes in the road for sure in the AFC North, which you don't always get. So you better take advantage of it because you're not going to get that opportunity year after year. You have that opportunity. All the more important to get those pieces fitting together now because who knows what the Browns will look like next year. And the Bengals and the Steelers, you're seeing it in Washington. It can all change in 1 year.
Yeah, it can. It's been a long time coming for us, but yes, it can all change in 1 year. Gerry, I look forward to seeing you up in Baltimore this weekend. Thank you so much for taking the time.
We'll look forward to catching up on Sunday. Talk to you.
Back after this, Bram wants to show ESPN 630, the Sports Capital. All right, welcome back. I want to talk about two things in regard to the Commanders and the Ravens. One, is this a measuring stick game, which Dan Quinn said, and I addressed with John Keim yesterday in his press conference with the media. It's not. They just don't look at things like that, that they don't look at it that way. It is also week 6, but I think for the fan base, obviously, this is a really big deal game. It's the first showcase game. Nance and Romo are going to show up to call it, albeit I hope you're listening to me, London and Logan, but still, hey, I get it. Like, they're going to put a showcase game. NBC tried to flex it into Sunday Night Football for good reason. It's the quarterback matchup. It's a big, huge marquee moment. For Baltimore, this has happened a million times, but for Washington, I mean, I think they've made believers out of everybody. Everybody's putting them up in their power rankings. People are doing film dives on all the physicality and the play, the execution of the offense, and Jaden ahead of the curve abilities. And so, like, all the things that we've been talking about here and we've been seeing and almost in disbelief about, well, like, the nation is caught up to it and they want to take a look at this too. And it's going to be a showcase game for Washington for sure. It's the first feels like big game of the year. Is it a measuring stick? I don't know. Like, I think either way, it's week 6. Either way, this is all very new. Either way, I think Washington's going to lose along the way. They could very easily lose to a team that runs the ball the way that Baltimore runs the ball. They could very easily win the way their offense is going right now and the way Baltimore's defense is nowhere near as effective as they were a year ago. So I can see all sides of it. I think more than anything, I think it's just one of those, we haven't had one that is, as Gerry Sandusky put it, like ahead, like mature in a way that you wouldn't expect at this stage of the entire operation and program. But here we are, and they're kind of rewriting a rebuild and what they call a recalibration. And if that's what it is, I don't even know how to describe what they did, but here we are. And so we're all kind of like really excited about this. But when you look at the Ravens, I think the other thing that really kind of stands out, and I want to talk to Dan Quinn about this when I get a chance to talk to him tomorrow, when I get to talk to him for the purpose of the broadcast, And that is something that I'm going to play for you right now, which is something he kind of said offhanded. And this is, the question was about defensively that Baltimore is struggling a little bit, but at the same time can be very creative in the way that they try to show pressures, and how Jaden Daniels is going to need to be careful dealing with what is in the past been a very difficult defense to figure out. It hasn't been for quarterbacks over the last few weeks, but traditionally it is. And as Gerry Sandusky put it, it's something that they've built and they'll fix and they'll get better. But here's what Quinn said about it.
They've got a real identity, and they have for a long time, the way they've, played defense and selected players, and, from Ozzie all the way through Eric, and it's been really, really effective. What's happened more, through the last few years is probably more, you're seeing simulated pressures where sometimes it's 4-man rush, looks like a blitz, and Baltimore and others, and ourselves included, incorporate some of that to show a blitz, but then play a coverage behind. As good as the offenses are, you're trying to find every advantage you can. But one thing that's been sure, Zach, he's on it, and as a first-time coordinator to, just there's a real standard about how they play defense. And not only has he upheld that, he lived it, so there's different, understanding of that, I would think from his point of view.
I think the larger point there, which is the most incredible point really of all of it from Quinn, is the acknowledgement of that organizationally, and it's a reaffirmation of what Gerry Sandusky was talking about, they play the way they play. They've set a standard. They know the types of players they want to select. They know who a Raven is. When Zach Orr, announced yesterday, the new defensive coordinator, that they're bringing Dean Pease back to be a senior advisor, the first thing out of his mouth was he's a Raven. The Commanders have talked about this. Adam Peters talked about this. Lance Newmark's talked about it. Dan Quinn's talked about it. But they're in year one of it, and it feels, the affirmation of the decisions they made are clearly on display by the way the team is playing and the chemistry that they're playing with, and obviously how far ahead of everything Jaden Daniels actually is. But the hope is that in 5, 10, 15 years, this is how you look at the Commanders as an annual playoff contender. When the stars are aligned, they have a shot at a Super Bowl, etc. And that they actually know who they are, what their systems are, and who the people are that they're trying to acquire. And I thought it was an interesting acknowledgement of it. One other thing I just wanted to mention, because there was a lot of comparisons of Jaden Daniels to Lamar Jackson. I don't think that they're actually comparable players, other than they're both highly athletic players and were picked very high and won Heisman trophies and are both very good. But I think their skill sets are actually quite different. And I think, especially if you think back to Lamar early, you think of him more really as a running quarterback than you do as a throwing quarterback. And it kind of came together a couple years into his career. Jaden seems to be starting as someone who's really pass first, who's capable of running. So I think they're very different players. So I've been trying to think of the comp. What would be the comp I would give him? And the comp that I came up with was John Elway. That he seems more to me in line with someone who's kind of ahead of the curve as a passer, but a smooth decision maker and devastating runner when necessary. So then I looked up John Elway just to look at his stats and see if if it was comparable to look at this. And Jaden Daniels through 5 games has the highest completion percentage in the NFL currently. And we'll see how long that lasts. And he had a 4-game stretch that was unlike any quarterback at any point in time ever in the history of the NFL, Elway included. And I looked at Elway's numbers, and back in his rookie season, he threw 7 touchdowns and 14 interceptions and completed under 50% of his throws. In fact, he didn't complete over 60% of his throws until year 9 of his career. So maybe I've got it wrong. As Gerry put it with Lamar, you guys have a unicorn, and I said, you guys do too. Maybe this is a one of one. And maybe there are no real comps, because I think of Elway, and that's what I think with Jaden Daniels or Randall Cunningham or maybe Steve Young, someone who's actually a really extremely accomplished passer, but who can devastate you with his legs and seemingly for the game that's different. And maybe that's where the comp is. But the stats early in Jaden's career are ahead of even the Elway curve. So stylistically, that's how I think of him. But in terms of competence and execution, he's even ahead of a Hall of Famer like that. Will it last? We'll see. So maybe to Jaden's point and to everybody's point, there is no comp. He is a one of one. Talk to you tomorrow. Bram wants to show ESPN 630, the Sports Capital.